Welcome to another Expats Portugal video, where it is our mission to help you easily find all the information you need about moving to or settling into Portugal. If you're watching us for the first time, please ensure you press the subscribe button and bell so you'll be alerted every time we put up something new. Tonight, we'll be discussing how to secure a rental contract from abroad for your visa process with Kylie from Casa Azul, an expat now living in Portugal who has already gone through the process herself and has made some valuable contacts within the real estate game here in Portugal. Please feel free to comment and ask questions in the chat below, and we'll endeavour to get back to you. If you would like to be a part of our live audience on these webinars, ensure you join us as a member on expatsportugal.com. Now to introduce you to Carl, the host of our show. Over to you, Carl.
Thank you, Astrid. Good evening, everybody. Hello to Denise in South Africa, Andrew in Lincolnshire, but visiting Portugal for the weekend soon. Hello from Texas tonight, from Barack. Alison and Michael are in Texas. Hello, good evening to you. San Francisco Bay Area, represented by Sid. Please keep those greetings coming in, as well as the questions for our special guest tonight, who is, of course, Kylie Anne. Good evening to you, Kylie. How are you?
Hi, Carl. I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm really well, and I know this is a hot topic tonight, getting your lease, the requirement for the D7 visa, for example, which is probably where most people are coming in on this. Before we get into that, and I know people do want to hear exactly how to do that, and you're going to be telling us, but can you give us a bit of your backstory? It's lovely to meet you. Let's find out more about you.
Sure. Well, hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. And thank you for the introduction, Carl. As Carl said, I'm Kylie. I'm from the United States. Born and raised in the Midwest. I moved to Portugal in September of last year. So give or take, I've been here about 6 months right now. Prior to that, I've been, like I said, in the Midwest my entire life. I have a marketing consulting agency. And recently I have a little real estate startup here in Portugal, which we're for sure going to be talking a little bit about tonight.
Brilliant. And that would be Casa Azul, which is, did you see a blue house and think that's what I'm going to name my business after? How did that name come about? Good idea having a Portuguese name, by the way.
No, good question. So originally I wanted the name to resonate with the classic Portuguese tiles that everyone knows about. But the name of those tiles, if you know, is azulejo, which is quite difficult much more difficult than Casa Azul to say. And I wasn't quite sure if people would understand what that means. And a lot of the traditional tiles are blue. So I was like, well, Casa Azul, blue house. It's a little bit easier to pronounce, a little bit easier to remember. So
excellent. I love it. Okay.
Yeah.
And presumably part of the inspiration for your business, tell me if this is the case or not, is some of the pain and challenge you may have felt yourself in securing that all-important 12-month lease for the visa process.
Right. Well, if you don't mind, I can kind of go into a little bit of a story of how I secured my lease, which really was what inspired the company to begin with. Is that cool?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Cool. So, well, prior to moving to Portugal, I was obviously well aware of the fact that you need to have the 12-month lease in order to secure the D7 visa. And I, like most people, just hopped on to the internet machine, typed away apartments for rent in Lisbon, Portugal. And sometimes it looked like there was a lot of options. Sometimes it looked like there was nothing available. I would make inquiries on websites like Idealista. I saw people on Facebook who were saying that it was just an absolute dead end. There was just so much mixed messaging. Sometimes it looked like there were a lot of options, sometimes nothing. So I went at it, pounded the pavement for a couple of months, just trying to find a lease. And eventually I just sort of gave up because nothing was really coming about. However, I had a friend who lived in Portugal and is in the real estate business. I wanted to do it on my own. I wanted to get the lease on my own. I thought I could do it. I didn't want to have to, I guess, depend on someone else to find the house for me. But when things just came up, when I was empty-handed, I had no choice but to go to him and ask if he could help me find an apartment while I was back in the States. And within 48 hours-ish, he was able to get me an apartment due to his own connections in the real estate business. So I had like I said, I probably spent 2 months trying to find a place. And then within 2 days, he was able to help me get the apartment that I'm in right now. And that was the inspiration for the company. Is I wanted to give people that same sort of insider experience into the Portuguese real estate market, because I mean, not only is it a foreign market and going into a market that you're unfamiliar with has its own challenges, but the real estate market in Portugal is particularly it's in a particularly challenging place right now on top of that. So having that sort of insider connection, I believe proves really valuable,
That's
as it did in my
superb.
own experience.
Yeah, for sure. How much of a relief was that?
That was the thing that was holding out my visa for the longest time. I kept on pushing it back and back and back. And once I got that, that was sort of the tipping point for me, where I actually said, okay, I can move to Portugal. So the relief it took off my shoulders was like, it was everything.
Yeah, it is a huge thing for people, isn't it? And having those blockages, you know, they're there obviously in the visa process for one reason or another. But getting the lease sorted out is a massive. I'm sure there are people here who've ticked that box, and also those who very much look forward to ticking that box, and they may well get your help doing that. You alluded there in what you were saying just now to the situation in Portugal. I think since you were looking, it's fair to say it's got worse, right?
It has, and it's interesting timing with this podcast. Even within the past week, there's been more developments within the Portuguese government that are actually making the housing situation arguably even more challenging than it already was. And for all of you who are here in the recording, I'm sure you've done some searching already. It's more likely only going to become even more difficult given some of these new regulations to find an apartment.
What can I ask you? I mean, yeah, we had a little discussion about this before, because you know I'm fascinated by what's going on with what the Portuguese government are calling they're not calling it the housing crisis, because that's not Portuguese, but Anna will help us out with the term that's being used in the Portuguese Parliament, I'm sure. What do you make of it personally? What do you think is going on, and what do you hope for?
Well, what do I make of it? I want to believe that the intentions are good, because the matter of the fact is there are a lot of people, not just foreigners, I mean, locals here in Portugal, that are really having a difficult time with housing. So I want to believe that all of the moves that are being made on the policy side of things are meant with good intentions to help people. However, it seems that the more and more these policies come about, the more difficult things seem to become. And that's where you have so many different sides coming in, arguing and pointing fingers. And I'm certainly not here to do that. But the matter of the fact is, it just seems to keep on getting more difficult, and only seems more likely for that to happen.
Yeah, fascinating. So whatever your political views are, bottom line is it's the inventory is not there, and it's difficult to find places. And of course, it's especially difficult to find somewhere if you're doing that remotely, which of course most people will be, won't they? And hence your business. You had the aha moment, I suspect. So you had the massive relief of looking for 2 months for yourself. You asked somebody to help you. They helped you in 2 days. How soon after that did the aha moment come, the eureka moment, when you thought, hold on a minute, I can help other people to do this?
Honestly, immediately, but I didn't think that I could actually turn it into a viable business. So I moved to Portugal in September, as I said, and I kind of sat on the idea for several months, because like I said, once I got here, I realized just how lucky I was to be able to have that insider get me the apartment. I didn't really think that I could replicate it for anybody else. So the aha moment happened long ago, but the actual execution of it took some time.
Well, that's in setting up the business and getting going and welcoming your first clients. So how does the process work then, Kylie? Is it as simple as somebody saying to you, look, I want you to find me somewhere for my visa, and you go ahead and do it?
Yeah, yes and no. So, I mean, I've tried to make it as simple as possible, and I'll explain from beginning to end how it works. So if you go to my website right now, casaazulpt.com, you would click the Rent With Us button, and then click the Submit a Request for an Apartment form. Once you hit that request, it's just a short questionnaire outlining the basics of what you're looking for in a rental. For example, do you want a 1-bedroom, a 2-bedroom? What is your preferred neighborhood to live in? Your intended move-in date, just the basics. And once you submit that to me, I have an entire pool of real estate partners who I've teamed up with in order to make this business become a reality. I relay that information back to them, and they return whatever options they have. If we don't have anything available that fits those specifications at that moment, which is very common, and I can sort of explain the timeline and how I expect things to work out for most people, you will immediately be added to what I suppose is a waiting list for that particular type of apartment rental that you're looking for. And the waiting list works in the order you were added to it. So priority, no one jumps the line. It's whoever got there first gets the first dibs on the next apartment that comes available fitting those specifications. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Does that answer your
makes
question?
absolute sense. Yeah, fantastic. And you were going to say, roughly that speaking, then how long might that take? Obviously, if you've got the inventory ready to go and it's a good match and people aren't too fussy, I don't mean that in a bad way, because sometimes people are very happy to take something rather than nothing. What are the best case and worst case time scenarios for you working with you?
Well, thank you for asking this question, because I think it's really important to address. So if I can add a little bit of context first, if you are an American here in the chat, you might be vaguely familiar with what hunting for an apartment rental is like in the United States. Let's say I go to realtor.com, it's January 1st, and I want to find a rental for April 1st. In the United States, that's very simple to do, to think that, okay, 3 months from now, I'm going to want a rental. I can totally do that. There's going to be plenty of options already open for April. Not in Portugal. What happens a lot of times is, let's say it's December 23rd, someone says, okay, I'm done with my lease on January 1st. And then it goes on the market the next day. Within 5 days, they're going to try to find someone to fill that lease. So the expectation that you can look out several months in advance for a rental is, unless it's a particularly, I would say a prime real estate, it's very unlikely to happen. So the timeline, best case and worst case scenario. Best case scenario, I would say a week. After that, I would expect up to 30 days. And the reason for that is because, again, like 30 days is sort of like the average on what we see when someone decides to give up their apartment, it becomes vacant, it goes back on the market. So after submitting a request, I would always just say up to 30 days, give it that amount of time for people to decide that they want to up and leave out of their apartments and things to become available. So if you're on the waiting list, it's not by any means like what I would say a death sentence. You're not going to be there forever. You just have to give it some time, wait for someone to decide they want to pick up and leave, and then it's open.
Yeah. Okay. That's wonderful. And thank you for that, because making the cultural adjustments very important. You can't assume it's the same sort of market, or that the market works in a similar way to the United States, or probably from many other destinations, not destinations, from many points of departure that people will be coming from. So good point there. Question has just come in from Alison and Michael. Thank you, Kylie. We have been in the challenge from our laptop in the US. That's a familiar picture, I think, for people here. You know that yourself, Kylie. Diligently searching 3 months now via the idealist listings, sending messages to the listing agents. We see so many that could be the one. And how disappointing is that, right? These are my words, not Alison and Michael's here. You can get your hopes up, can't you, seeing the pictures? But the majority of the agencies or the owners require a guarantor. We don't have one. But in lieu of that, they ask us to pay the whole year in advance. We don't want to take that big risk or big upfront expense. Just the reality we must accept, or a far lower inventory then. So I'm not entirely sure what you mean by that at the end, but we get the gist of the question there, Alison and Michael. Thank you very much. What do you make of that, Kylie?
Well, I don't think that that's an unusual situation. So as, for example, most apartments here, once one becomes open, let's say it's posted on a website like Idealista, within an hour, many of those apartments have 50 inquiries, sometimes even 100 inquiries. The more affordable they are, the more people are trying to get after them in very, very short amount of time. So that's not unusual at all. That's typical, hundreds of inquiries on a single apartment. So more likely than not, the agent the landlord, whoever's listing that apartment, is just going to go for almost pick names out of a hat. It could be whoever gets there first. They could be just deciding this person, whatever their process is. So yes, it's very challenging to just put in an inquiry on Idealista or some similar website and expect to see anyone respond, just by the sheer amount of people searching for apartments right now. Yeah. And regarding the guarantor situation, that is correct. Many apartments, many landlords do require one in Portugal. However, up to what I usually see in most situations is that they'll ask for 6 months up front. A year, I have seen that in a couple of situations. It is quite egregious, and I do understand the feeling of risk behind that, absolutely. But it is true, most do require, if you don't have a guarantor, 6 months of rent up front. If you want to potentially negotiate with the landlord, my biggest suggestion is to show contracts versus as your proof of income. So anyone who's gone through the rental process also knows that the Portuguese are big on contracts. They love to see signatures on dotted lines. I don't know what it is, but make sure that you have those available if you want to prove that you do have the income or the means to sustain a lease for a year, and you could potentially negotiate that upfront payment down to 6 months per se.
Okay, so there is some room for negotiation, but of course, if you're up against competitors from those 50 or 100 inquiries who will just say, yes, I'll pay the year, there's the challenge, there's the problem, right? So I hope that helps. And we will have a session after the recording where you can ask for further clarification or more personal questions if you prefer to do that without being on the recording tonight. So don't worry, you can do that. And of course, we've got the Dream Team session from 9 in an hour and 10 minutes time approximately, and we'll have the link for that. So do join us for the Dream Team. And of course, the Queen of the Visas as well, Agilda Pereira from EI, will be on at 9, and we'll be taking your questions there too. So stick around for that. Another question is coming from Gail. Good evening to you, Gail. It's Gail and Dwight in New Mexico. Just check back with a French couple that did have a D7 friendly long-term rental of a condo on a beachfront a bit north of Nazaré near Alcobaça. Very nice, even if I'm a little bit partial myself and to this area, in a condo complex with lots of amenities there. It was on our list of possibilities before we decided to focus on a house purchase. They've texted me back and have a renter now, but their neighbor is offering a long-term lease from April at the same complex, and they have another quinta with availability possibly from September, located about 15 kilometers inland from Nazaré. I told them I would ping out this info. Oh, okay, that's an offer, so it's not a question. I think it's a sign of the desperation of the situation that Gail and Dwight are happy to share intel that they've got and specifics about a place. So thank you very much for doing that, Gail and Dwight. That's very thoughtful of you. Something I need to ask you, Kylie, thank you for being here from Casa Azul tonight, is which areas you cover, presumably the capital.
Correct. Right now, our focus is Lisbon and the greater Lisbon area. And we do plan to expand out to other large cities in Portugal, such as Porto and cities in the Algarve. But right now, our focus is Lisbon and the greater Lisbon area. As we continue to build more relationships with additional agencies and partners, we will expand out. But getting a hold on Lisbon, the most challenging area of the country to get a hold on, is our focus right now.
Very good. Okay. And the hope is that you will expand further. So for those people whose hearts are set on being outside the capital, or Porto for that matter, what's your without giving away your trade secrets, what's your general advice to people, given that this, as we found out there from Alison and Michael, looking on your laptop from afar is a pretty miserable process. It's a real needle in a haystack thing, and you're up against a lot of competition, when you do that, if you go to Idealista and such sites. What other inside track or hacks can you offer to people this evening?
Well, what I will say, first of all, is that if you are looking for an apartment outside of the greater Lisbon area, please still submit your information on my website. Some of the agencies that I do work with right now do have a few different apartments in other cities in Portugal. I may be able to to help within those other cities. So that would be my first tip, is to just reach out and I'll see if one of my partners is able to pull a couple of strings. Otherwise, my biggest recommendation is I would try to find direct email addresses, or even LinkedIn. If you can go and find an agency online, look up specific agents and message them directly versus just shooting out a message on Idealista per se. Yeah. Be specific and keep on reaching out, because as you said, just putting a message out in the dark and expecting someone to respond to it is a dead end in this market. So be specific, be intentional, find some agency or some agent in particular to work with.
Be specific. Well, great tip. Thank you for that. Dan is saying great information, Kylie. Thank you. Excuse my ignorance of this. Am I right that to get a D7 visa, you also need to show proof of a certain amount of annual income that you're bringing to Portugal, not just enough income to pay the rent? You may want to take that, Kylie. Of course, we're talking to Gilda later on, but do you want to answer that for Dan?
Sure. So yes, I believe the requirements are still the same in 2023 as they were when I applied in 2022. You do need to show a minimum income requirement of the Portuguese minimum wage, which I know has increased since 2022, but I do believe that the requirement is still the minimum wage. So the way to show that is, again, through contracts, bank statements, employment letters, etc. So yes, you do need to have fit the income requirement.
And we can get specific with Gilda. Thank you for that answer, Kylie, by the way. And we can get specific with the Dream Team at 9 o'clock tonight. So stick around for that, Dan. And you can see that the link is in the chat for that. Make a note of that, or copy and paste that to your clipboard, or email it to yourself. It's precious information. And we'll see you at 9 for that. Is it easy? This is a great question from Laurie. Good evening to you, Laurie. Is it easy to find a larger apartment or house? If so, is there a service that matches potential roommates arriving at approximately the same time? Have you thought of that, Kylie, as an extension to your business? Would you put people together in a larger house?
Well, what I can say is that there is a little bit of a challenge with that, actually, regarding some of the new rules and legislation on apartments. So is it possible, and have I thought about it? Yes, but whether or not it would be legal at this point, I'm not 100% sure. But yes, we have explored the idea of matching up roommates before.
It is a good idea, isn't it? Excellent, Laurie. Thank you for that. Jennifer wants your email address. So I'm sure that's in our chat, and we'll make sure everybody's got that, certainly after the recording as well. And it will be on the notes of the recording for people who want to get in touch with Kylie Adamek of Casa Azul. Ursula, that's an interesting question here. Are there the same issues with rentals if you're moving from an EU country? I mean, there's no advantage really from being from an EU country in terms of inventory or anything like that, is there? You're not an advantage because you're moving from an EU country. Would you agree?
Yes, everyone is starting at the same starting line.
That's a great way of putting it. Yeah. You might be closer and you might be able to visit and have a look at properties. But yeah, as Kylie rightly says, they're starting at the same starting point, their starting line. Thank you very much for all this sharing of information that's going on in the chat. Do the right thing, folks. If these properties that are being talked about aren't for you, why not put them in the Expats Portugal forum? And make someone else's day, possibly, if it's not a right fit for you. And the email address for Kylie is info@casaazulpt.com. And you're probably going to want the spelling of that, so check the chat for that. Again, okay, we've got email addresses going back and forth in the chat there. Thanks, everybody. How about the requirements for digital nomads? I think that's another 9 o'clock Dream Team question, but presumably you're seeing a little bit of pressure coming from the digital nomad scene as well, Kylie.
Yes, and that's a particularly interesting topic. Is as you know, maybe some of you watching know, recently the Portuguese government created this new visa, which is the digital nomad visa. Unlike the D7 visa, this digital nomad or D8 visa is, I believe, a maximum of 1 year in Portugal. So it's actually sort of funny. The new legislation in Portugal is trying to cut down on these short-term rentals, 1 year or less. But at the same time, there's a new visa that is all about coming to Portugal on a short-term basis, 1 year or less. So it's quite interesting how everything is sort of playing out right now.
It is, isn't it? And that's what Willie's asking this in the chat as well. It is like having one foot on the brake and one on the gas, isn't it? What are the changes to the housing regulations that Kylie refers to, or where do we find them? I mean, that's the problem at the moment, Kylie, isn't it? Is that these were launched as proposals, as a bit of a kind of PR exercise almost. You know, the country knows, the politicians know, everybody knows that there is a situation with the housing here in Portugal. So some proposals were announced, but nothing's been decided, has it?
Well, I believe there was a final decision at this point to stop. The big decision that's really impacting at least my partners right now is the elimination of licenses for short-term rentals. So at this point, if you have, for example, an Airbnb or a short-term lease that you want to create on an apartment that you own for, let's say, 6 months, they're no longer handing out licenses for those short-term leases. So that is just one of several developments, but arguably like the most impactful one at this point.
Yeah, interesting. And yeah, interesting is a kind word to use, is what Anna's saying about your assessment of the situation. Well, I'm sure we'll hear more from Anna after we've stopped the recording, which we'll do in just a moment. I just want, unless any other questions come in that people want to ask at this point, I just want to come back to a personal point of view. We started off with finding out a bit more about you. Where does somebody who has this level of choice and knowledge now choose to live in Lisbon? What's your favorite part of Lisbon?
Oh my goodness. Well, I live in the Saldanha neighborhood of Lisbon, which, if you aren't very familiar with Lisbon, this is more of the business district of the city, and it's absolutely wonderful. I love living here. I'm right in the middle of everything I need, and I'm a short metro away from the city center. So to be honest, I'm so lucky. I couldn't have picked much of a better place to live. However, I do think that when my lease is up in September, I will venture out a little bit to maybe Cascais or something like that.
Okay, that's what the insider says. Saldanha, and then moving up to Cascais later on. So thank you for being here. Thank you for telling us about your business and answering the questions that people have been asking this evening. And good luck to you with not just your business and with your efforts to help people moving to Portugal, but good luck to you with your new life here in Portugal.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm really excited for what's to come, and good luck to everyone out there who's in the middle of the process. I understand how challenging it is, but I really hope to help you all with all of your rental related challenges, and it is worth the time and headache sometimes that you put into it. So best of luck to everyone.
That's a really nice sentiment to share, because sometimes people, I think, do just want to give up when they find themselves in the position that you were in. They just can't find anywhere to live. And we heard about the weight that was lifted off your shoulders when you finally found somewhere. So I think basically what you say is keep going. It's well worth it moving to Portugal.
Absolutely.
What a wonderful place to pause for a moment, and we'll take a few more questions from our audience tonight here on Zoom after we've stopped the recording. Thank you so much, Kylie.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.